Racist cops wrongly arrested black teen. Freeze when mum shows up as FBI boss. Dad a billionaire CEO. Sebastian Andrew finished his afternoon tutoring session and stood near the sleek, black custom sedan in the high-end retail parking lot, scrolling through calculus notes on his tablet, when suddenly the light overhead reflected off his expensive private school jacket. Unaware that his ordinary wait for his father was about to be obliterated by unwarranted hostility, two local police cruisers, driven by officers Charles and John, observed him. Their suspicion, heavy with years of unchecked bias, was already loaded and ready to fire. They didn't even care about rights, procedures, or the law. Their only goal was dominance. The officers advanced, their motions predatory, turning a routine afternoon into a terrifying ambush powered by racist profiling. For decades, racial bias has armed the police and silenced the victims. To Charles and John, Sebastian's presence near a luxury vehicle wasn't a sign of achievement. It was an anomaly. A black teen in a red polo who must have stolen something. He was a target to dominate, not a 16-year-old kid trying to get home. Their approach was instant, their voices rising, their tempers snapping under the weight of their own prejudice. Hands on the hood, boy, don't move, Officer Charles barked. The pavement was instantly stained with fear and humiliation. But the officers made a fatal miscalculation. They had just laid hands on the heir to a global tech empire. Worse, they hadn't realized the woman speeding toward them was Theodora Andrew, FBI Assistant Director of the Organized Crime Division. When she arrived, every badge in sight froze. But how do you fight a system protected by powerful politicians when you're ordered to stand down by your own bureau? And what happens when a billionaire CEO decides to weaponize his entire fortune, choosing to crash the local economy for justice? The warm California air settled over the pavement as Sebastian checked his wrist for the time, sending a quick text home. 10 minutes out. Got the calculus clear. He saw the cruisers pull up, tires crunching on the asphalt. Despite all his mother's training, stay calm, keep hands visible. Sebastian felt the familiar, cold knot of dread tighten. Charles and John strutted toward him, their faces twisted in what looked like anticipation rather than concern. The false accusation of grand larceny hit hard. Charles grabbed Sebastian's arm, slamming him against the car door. John dropped to one knee, applying pressure, matching the visual in the image, and whispering a vicious racial slur. Sebastian's voice cracked in protest as he was handcuffed and dragged towards the cruiser. Miles away, Theodora's secure location system alarm flashed, accompanied by a panicked call from Andrew. Her world of complex federal paperwork vanished. Andrew, standing nearby, watched the live feed on her screen. Their son, bruised, pinned by racist cops. They moved as one. Theodora grabbing her vest and sidearm with mechanical precision, FBI protocol taking over, Andrew dialing his head of security. The black SUV roared to life, prepared for a full federal intervention, racing towards the moment that would shatter not just Sebastian's safety, but the entire power structure of Mason Creek. The scream of tires biting the asphalt was the only warning. The sleek black SUV, armored, tinted, and radiating authority, cut across 3 empty parking lanes and slewed to a halt mere feet from the cruiser. The passenger door opened before the vehicle fully stopped, and Theodora Andrew stepped out, the sun catching the reflective stitching of her tactical vest. The sidearm on her hip was holstered but impossible to ignore. In the tableau of violence, time seemed to catch up, forcing the officers to see her. A woman whose posture and gaze instantly communicated absolute, unforgiving command. Sebastian, pinned against the black sedan, barely registered her arrival through the blinding pain in his shoulder and wrist. Charles and John froze. They were accustomed to compliant citizens, not rapid federal intervention. Step away from the vehicle. Theodora's voice cut through the air, low and clear, carrying the weight of a courtroom verdict. She didn't shout. She delivered an instruction that defied disobedience. Officer Charles, fueled by adrenaline and wounded pride, reflexively tried to regain control. "Ma'am, you need to step back. This is an active local investigation into grand larceny." Stay behind the yellow tape. There is no yellow tape, officer, Theodora countered, taking a slow, deliberate step closer. Her eyes flicked down to Sebastian's contorted arm, then back to Charles. And there is no probable cause. I am Assistant Director Theodora Andrew, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Organized Crime Division. This situation is now a federal matter concerning the civil rights violation of a minor. You are currently in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Charles stammered, the federal statute hitting him like a physical blow. He glanced at John, who simply backed away a half step, the vicious anticipation draining from his face. They understood the gravity of that specific statute. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was the mechanism for federal prosecution of police misconduct. You have 5 seconds to remove your hands from my son and release him, or I will consider this a continuation of a felony assault on a federal property occupant. Theodora continued, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm, not drawing it, but letting the officers see the intent. Badge number, last name, and department must be verbalized and confirmed. Now, I want immediate access to all body cam footage pertaining to this stop. Do not delete, do not modify. As Theodora managed the confrontation with mechanical, legal precision, Andrew emerged from the driver's side. Unlike his wife, he wore no vest and carried no weapon, yet his presence was 10 times more intimidating. He stood silent, the warm afternoon sun glinting off his designer sunglasses and the razor edge of his tailored suit. He didn't engage the officers. Instead, his iPhone, a custom model with military-grade stabilization, was raised, meticulously documenting the scene. Andrew moved like a drone, silent and deadly, capturing the license plate numbers of both cruisers, the names embroidered on the officers' chests, the exact bruising already visible on Sebastian's wrists, and the pressure marks on the sedan door. He was logging evidence, not just witnessing. Every second of his filming unnerved the officers far more than Theodora's shouts, because he represented the cold, calculating, inexhaustible resources of a hostile entity. Charles's voice cracked. Look, this kid was loitering near a high-end vehicle that matched a description. It is his vehicle, officer. Andrew's voice was a low, resonant baritone, cutting through Charles's denial. He hadn't lowered his phone camera. And my son was waiting for me after a tutoring session. We are 2 blocks from the family's primary residence. Your suspicion is noted and recorded for discovery in future litigation. The silence that followed was suffocating. Charles knew he was cornered by 2 forces, the absolute legal authority of the FBI, and the limitless financial threat posed by the billionaire CEO whose entire demeanor suggested he would happily spend his last dollar ensuring Charles died professionally, legally, and financially. Officer John quickly dropped the pretense of force. He reluctantly reached for Sebastian's cuffs. The metallic click of the restraints opening sounded deafeningly loud. Sebastian stumbled free, rubbing his raw, chafed wrists. He was still standing, thanks to years of his mother's training, but his spine was bowed under the weight of the humiliation. This is not over, Andrew, Charles spat, retreating toward his cruiser, his eyes fixed on the insignia of Theodora's vest. We'll be running surveillance. You tell your boy to watch his step. Theodora stepped in front of Sebastian, shielding him with her body. Any further attempt at harassment, intimidation, or unauthorized surveillance on this family will be treated as obstruction of a federal investigation. We will consider your threats documented. Within 60 seconds, the cruisers peeled away, leaving only the smell of burnt rubber and the lingering, sick dread on the pavement. Andrew gently guided Sebastian into the back seat of the SUV. The moment the heavy, ballistic door clicked shut, the professional armor around all 3 of them began to crack. The drive home was silent. Andrew drove, maintaining a terrifyingly controlled speed, his jaw muscles working beneath his skin. Theodora, seated next to Sebastian, immediately went into FBI evidence preservation mode, despite the agony in her chest. Hold still, Seba, she murmured, her voice stripped of its command authority, now only a mother's worried tremor. She carefully photographed the deep red chafing and swelling around his wrists, documenting the restraint marks with clinical precision. She checked his pulse, assessed the bruising on his shoulder, and applied a medicated balm to the tender skin. "You did well, sweetheart. You stayed calm. You kept your hands visible. You followed everything," she whispered, pulling him against her shoulder, resting her cheek against his hair. Sebastian remained rigidly silent, his body shuddering intermittently. He looked out the window, watching the familiar California suburbs rush past, places that suddenly seemed foreign and dangerous. They were 3 minutes from home when the rigid control he'd maintained finally shattered. "Mom!" he choked out, the word barely a sound. "My arm. It burns." Theodora reached for the medical kit, but it wasn't the physical pain that broke the dam. He leaned forward, his voice reduced to a broken whisper, the memory of John's action burning hotter than the abrasions. "When he slammed me against the car, the other one, John, he was whispering." Sebastian gasped, tears finally streaming down his cheeks, wetting Theodora's uniform shirt. "He said I was a parasite, and that I should know my place, and he called me the N-word, Mom. He called me while he was pushing down on my neck." He was smiling. The temperature in the SUV dropped 10 degrees. Andrew's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his eyes momentarily flicking up to meet Theodora's in the rearview mirror. In that instant, they ceased to be the FBI assistant director and the tech CEO. They were parents who had failed, briefly, to shield their child from the ancient poison of hatred, and that failure demanded a response far beyond a simple lawsuit. Theodora held Sebastian tight, letting the grief flood the vehicle, but even through the tears, her mind was already calculating. "We are getting you cleaned up. We are getting a full forensic medical examination. We will get high-resolution photographs of every bruise, every mark," she said, her voice now dangerously soft, the sound of steel being polished. "Your testimony is ironclad, Sebastian. You gave them nothing to use against you." As they pulled into the secure drive of their estate, Andrew keyed the security override. He pulled the SUV into the private garage, parking near a bank of servers. He killed the engine and faced his wife, the last vestiges of his CEO composure gone, replaced by the lethal determination of a man who has decided to incinerate an opponent. "I just sent all the footage to the firm's private cloud," Andrew stated, his voice flat. "I've instructed my legal team to assemble a 24-hour rapid response team. I want every asset in this state ready to deploy. I want their financials, their patrol routes, their pensions, their families, and every politician who has protected them. I want Charles and John completely isolated." Theodora nodded, already pulling out her personal encrypted comms device. "The local politicians will circle the wagons. The bureaucracy will try to make this disappear. They will order me to stand down, citing department protocol, conflicts of interest, and political pressure." Andrew opened his door, stepping out into the shadowed safety of the garage. He looked like a man preparing to sign an order that would ruin hundreds of lives, and he did not blink. "Then we will crash their economy, Theodora. They wanted to dominate a 16-year-old kid in a red polo shirt. They just laid hands on the future of this company. We are done fighting the system with bureaucracy. We are fighting it with economic devastation. We make Mason Creek hurt so badly that every voter and every politician will tear those officers out of the department themselves." The Andrew Estate's high-security office was a fortress of glass and encryption, but even here, the poison of institutional inertia was beginning to seep in. Sebastian was safe in the medical wing, being examined by a private trauma physician. Andrew was downstairs, already mobilizing his financial war machine. Theodora, however, was facing the silent, bureaucratic terror of a system determined to protect itself. She sat at her desk, the FBI network humming on her primary monitor, the cool, sterile light reflecting off the edges of her uniform shirt. She had meticulously compiled her complaint. The unauthorized stop, the lack of probable cause, the excessive force, the racial slur, and the direct citation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242, a violation that should have triggered an immediate, full-scale investigation. The moment she hit submit, the system reacted, not with justice, but with panic. 20 minutes later, The secure comms line flashed, indicating a Level 1 priority call from Director Samuel Hayes, head of the FBI field office in Atlanta and Theodora's direct superior. Hayes was a political operator disguised in a sharp suit, a man whose career was defined by avoiding controversy and maintaining operational budget stability. His face, projected onto Theodora's screen, was a mask of strained sincerity. "Theodora, good God, we just got the notification. Are you and Sebastian all right?" Hayes began, the practiced concern failing to mask the cold calculation in his eyes. "We are recovering, Director. Sebastian has visible bruising. My report outlines a severe civil rights violation by 2 local officers in Mason Creek. I am requesting immediate federal takeover and coordination with the U.S. Attorney's Office to launch a grand jury investigation into patterns of discriminatory policing within that department." Hayes leaned back, his sigh amplified by the secure microphone. "Tensions are high, Theodora. Look, I share your immediate concern, naturally. But we need to look at the optics here. You know how this looks. It looks like 2 bigots assaulted a minor, Director," she corrected, her voice devoid of inflection. "It looks like an assistant director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation is leveraging the full weight of the Bureau to prosecute a personal vendetta against local law enforcement," Hayes countered, the edge in his voice sharpening. "The state is already squealing. The Mason Creek Chief of Police, a Chief Davies, is already on the phone with the Attorney General, crying harassment. We cannot afford this kind of instability, Theodora. It undermines our partnerships." Hayes pressed a button, bringing up a split-screen image of the local news ticker, already running a blaring headline about an unprecedented FBI intervention. "This is toxic, Theodora. Your high profile, your husband's standing," he paused, choosing the word carefully, "makes the Bureau look like it's waging a personal, class-based war. We can't have that appearance." Theodora felt the familiar, sickening lurch of the institution closing ranks. She knew the move before he announced it. "Therefore," Hayes continued, his voice settling into the smooth cadence of an official directive, "effective immediately, I am ordering you to recuse yourself from any and all involvement in the case concerning your son, Sebastian Andrew, and Officers Charles and John." He didn't stop there. He assigned the investigation not to the Rapid Response Civil Rights Team, but to a slow-moving, politically safe internal affairs unit led by a senior agent known for his exhaustive, years-long processes, Agent Miller. Miller will conduct a thorough, unbiased investigation. It will be confidential and procedure-driven. We must let the system work, Theodora. You must stand down. Theodora gripped the edge of the desk, fighting the urge to shatter the screen. "Director, by the time Miller gets around to requesting documentation, the evidence will be compromised. This is a deliberate stall. They are already enacting a cover-up. That is an allegation, Assistant Director, and you are currently recused." Hayes reminded her, the finality absolute. "I expect full cooperation. We are trying to protect the Bureau's credibility." The call ended. Theodora was left with the bitter taste of bureaucratic betrayal. The system she had sworn to uphold, the mechanism for justice, had just ordered her to stand by and watch the perpetrators walk free. She immediately switched to the next threat, the local bureaucracy. She initiated the standard, official FBI request for the evidence from Mason Creek PD. Chief Davies, a man whose resume was built entirely on political maneuvering and protecting his department from accountability, responded within the hour not to Theodora, but to the generic FBI field office email. His refusal was smooth, practiced, and dripping with thinly veiled hostility. Davies claimed the officers were operating under stress, investigating a high-priority grand larceny. Furthermore, pursuant to department protocol, our IT staff are currently experiencing technical difficulties in uploading the body camera footage from the incident. The email read, "We are working diligently to restore the data, which appears to have been corrupted. We also have witness statements indicating that the subject, Sebastian Andrew, resisted aggressively and was verbally hostile toward the officers, necessitating the use of minimum restraint." Lies. All of it. Sebastian had been coached since he was 6 to remain silent and compliant. The technical difficulties were the digital equivalent of shredding paper. Theodora slammed her hand onto the desk, the low thud echoing in the secure office. The institutional roadblock wasn't just Hayes' directive. It was Davies' political armor, reinforced by years of quid pro quo with the state attorney general's office. They were operating in a protection bubble, where local misdeeds were shielded from federal oversight by political alliances. The official path was dead. The cover-up had succeeded in the first round. Theodora rose, pacing the length of her office. If the FBI would not fight, she would. But she couldn't use her FBI resources, not yet. Her terminal was clean, her communications monitored. She logged off the secure FBI network and switched to a burner laptop, utilizing an untraceable mesh network, a private asset maintained by Andrew's global security detail. Theodora Andrew, assistant director of the FBI, had just gone dark. She reached out to a handful of trusted, non-official contacts. A former investigative journalist known for deep diving into police corruption, a private security analyst who specialized in digital forensics, and a retired federal marshal who owed Theodora a 20-year-old favor. I need everything on 2 officers, Charles and John, Mason Creek PD, she typed into the encrypted chat. I need their departmental transfer history, every single civilian complaint, even the ones that were dismissed. I need their financial and property records. I want to know who is covering their legal fees and who they report to inside the local political structure. She authorized a substantial withdrawal from her personal untraceable account, a move designed to pay for the kind of information the FBI usually obtained with a subpoena. Andrew walked in just as she finished setting the parameters, his face grim but energized. He held a custom-printed legal folder thicker than a novel. The legal team has the groundwork laid, Andrew said, his eyes scanning her monitors, noting the shift to the untraceable network. I've identified 3 major investment projects my company has slated for Mason Creek, totaling over $800 million in infrastructure and employment. I've just instructed the C-level executives to halt all negotiations indefinitely. Theodora looked up, her expression hardening into a mirror of his own lethal intent. You're sending the financial warning shot. No, Theodora, Andrew corrected, his voice dangerously soft. That was not a warning. That was the first casualty. Mason Creek is about to learn that when you weaponize racism and assault our son, we don't sue for damages. We crash your city into the ground and bury your political careers under the debris. Theodora nodded, the anger and betrayal fueling her resolve. Hayes could sideline her. Davies could lie. But the official resistance only cemented their path. They would fight outside the lines, a rogue FBI director and a ruthless CEO, leveraging unprecedented power against a petty, shielded system. The real investigation, the dangerous one, was just beginning. The Omnicorp headquarters war room was typically reserved for hostile mergers and global acquisition strategies. Today, the atmosphere was colder, more focused, and infinitely more personal. The polished mahogany table was littered with municipal finance reports and zoning proposals for Mason Creek, all marked with blood-red hold stamps. Andrew stood at the head of the table, flanked by his chief counsel, Elena Rodriguez, and his head of global communications, Marcus Vance. Both looked pale, aware they were witnessing the calibration of a financial weapon aimed not at a competitor, but at a functioning local government. Mason Creek Chief Davies claims Sebastian resisted arrest and that the body cam footage is corrupted, Andrew stated, his voice a low monotone that carried the menace of impending disaster. He gestured toward the screen, which displayed Director Hayes' recusal order alongside Davies' dismissive email. My wife, Assistant Director Andrew, has been effectively sidelined by her own agency, forced to watch the cover-up unfold. He paused, removing his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. For decades, we have used the system's rules to seek justice. Filing lawsuits, appealing to internal affairs, trusting in slow, painful litigation. That ends now. Elena Rodriguez, the chief counsel, cleared her throat. Mr. Andrew, our standard procedure would be to file a federal civil rights lawsuit claiming assault, battery, and defamation. We have ironclad evidence. It will take time, but the payout will be punitive, ensuring those officers lose everything. Andrew looked at her, his expression conveying profound dismissal. Time? Weeks, months, years? While those officers patrol the streets, emboldened by their chief's protection, while they continue to terrorize other people's children. No, we will not seek a payout. We will not seek punitive damages. We will seek systemic demolition. He walked over to a massive electronic display that lit up with two figures, stark and devastating. Mason Creek Economic Forecast. Omnicorp Tech Park Investment. $500 million. Projected new jobs. 2,500. That investment, Andrew declared, tapping the $500 million figure, was the centerpiece of Mason Creek's future economic plan. It was supposed to stabilize their tax base for the next 50 years. He turned to Marcus Vance, his PR lead. Marcus, I want a press release issued within the hour. It needs to be clear, precise, and unequivocally devastating. We are pulling the entire $500 million investment, effective immediately, citing unacceptable civic instability and irreconcilable liability risks associated with localized institutional racism. Vance swallowed hard. Sir, that's unprecedented. The market will react wildly. The local real estate will crater. We are essentially guaranteeing a regional recession. Exactly, Andrew said, a grim satisfaction settling over his face. We are collapsing their financial stability. Let the citizens worry about their pensions and their property values, instead of whether or not their police chief is a bigot. That panic will create leverage. The second part of the strategy was even more aggressive. Andrew leaned across the table toward Elena. I want our top forensic accounting teams deployed. I don't want them looking for fraud. I want them to initiate a hostile, deep-dive audit of the entire Mason Creek municipal budget. Focus on discretionary funds, police department overruns, and specifically the police pension fund structure. We will find every weakness, every loophole, every potential conflict of interest, and we will publicly expose it. He smiled, a humorless, terrifying gesture. When the money leaves, the politicians will suddenly discover the sanctity of body cam footage. Within 90 minutes, the news exploded. The withdrawal of the Omnicorp investment wasn't just a story. It was an economic tsunami. Breaking. Tech giant pulls $500 million investment citing police misconduct. Mason Creek in freefall. City facing massive job losses after Omnicorp decision. The city's official response was chaos. Mayor Thompson, visibly sweating, appeared on a hastily arranged press conference, desperately trying to save face, while Chief Davies stood beside him, his expression switching from arrogant defensiveness to outright terror. This is an attack. A baseless attack leveraging economic power against our fine officers. Davies stammered into the microphones. We stand by Officers Charles and John. We ask Mr. Andrew to reconsider. The public reaction was instantaneous and brutal. Suddenly, the incident concerning the black teenager was no longer a fringe issue about racism. It was about the impending collapse of the local economy. Voters, particularly those who depended on the tax base and housing market stability, began flooding the mayor's office with furious calls demanding the chief's immediate dismissal and the swift release of the body cam footage. The focus had successfully shifted from the crime of police brutality to the cost of that brutality. Back in the secure home office, Theodora watched the news feeds with a mixture of grim admiration and professional apprehension. Andrew entered, holding a glass of scotch, his energy high from the tactical deployment. They're reeling. Davies is finished, politically, Andrew observed, watching the mayor's panicked appeal. They thought they could protect two thugs. They didn't realize the protection would cost them the city. Theodora pushed a printout of the news headline across her desk. Your strategy is brutally effective, Andrew. It bypasses the legal system entirely and goes straight for the political jugular. The legal system failed us the minute Hayes ordered your recusal, he retorted. I know, she conceded, but you are using a sledgehammer where I prefer a scalpel. She tapped the screen where her private investigator's initial reports were starting to trickle in, Raw data on Charles and John's complaints history. You're creating the windstorm, Andrew. You're turning the mayor and the city council into desperate men. But brute force only works up to a point. They will crash the system, but they won't incriminate Charles and John. She looked up, her FBI training asserting itself over the adrenaline. The bodycam footage, the internal reports, the corruption, that is still protected by Chief Davies. Your move forces them to choose between Davies' job and saving the city budget. They will fire Davies, but they won't hand over evidence that incriminates the entire department. Then we have bought time, and we have weakened their political defense. What's your scalpel strategy? Andrew asked, raising his glass. Theodora activated the burner laptop screen, displaying the initial dossier on Officer Charles. 3 previous assault complaints dismissed internally, and a suspiciously large recent refinance on a house he couldn't afford on his salary. While you're busy crashing the Mason Creek economy, I'm going after Charles and John directly, utilizing the vulnerability you've created, Theodora explained, her eyes fixed on the data. Your financial hammer just gave me the opening I need. The moment the mayor throws Davies under the bus, the internal structure of that department will fracture. I'll use that chaos to acquire the protected evidence and the witnesses who were too afraid to talk before. Because now, the cost of silence is the collapse of their city. The line had been drawn. Andrew had declared an economic war. Theodora was preparing the intelligence operation to secure the battlefield. They were a unified force, one dedicated to financial leverage, the other to meticulous exposure. Mason Creek was now ground zero. Theodora's operational space was a borrowed, nondescript warehouse bay 50 miles outside Mason Creek, outfitted overnight by Andrew's security team. It was clean, soundproof, and wired with enough computing power to rival a small satellite array. This was the dark web equivalent of an FBI field office, where rules were replaced by results. At a steel table, Theodora sat across from Agent Reyes, a former colleague from the cyber division whom she trusted implicitly. A quiet, meticulous woman who had been discreetly furloughed from the bureau years ago for refusing to cover up a superior's data breach. Reyes was now paid handsomely by Omnicorp for private consultation. Here is the official timeline from Mason Creek PD, Reyes said, sliding a printout across the table. Officers Charles and John logged the initiation of the stop at 3:17 p.m. They logged the arrest and physical restraint at 3:20 p.m. And here, she tapped a highlighted field, is the system log entry showing both body cams were manually disabled at 3:20 p.m., precisely when Sebastian was allegedly verbally hostile and aggressively resisting. Theodora didn't need the confirmation. They disabled the cameras before the assault to fabricate the narrative of resistance. It's standard procedure for officers confident in the lack of consequences. And Chief Davies is currently holding the mayor hostage with the lie that the footage is corrupted, leveraging the city's panic over the Omnicorp withdrawal, Reyes added. We know the footage exists and we know their reports are fabricated. But the FBI requires a chain of custody and official access, which Hayes has blocked. Theodora pushed the Mason Creek files aside. We need the evidence that circumvents the chain of custody, something that existed before they tried to sanitize the scene. Andrew brought Sebastian into the makeshift lab. Sebastian, physically recovered but still carrying the leaden weight of humiliation, sat opposite his mother. Theodora spoke to him not as a detective, but as a clinical expert focusing on trauma recollection. Sebastian, I need you to focus on the sensory details, exactly from the moment the cruisers stopped until they put the cuffs on. Everything. Sebastian recounted the events. The cold knot of fear, the sun reflecting off Charles's badge, the precise moment John's pressure forced the air out of his lungs, the specific racial slur. Did you say anything back? Theodora asked gently. No. I just told him my father was coming, and I asked him why he was doing this, Sebastian whispered, his voice catching. Theodora checked her notes, correlating his memory with the official reports. They claim you cursed them out and thrashed aggressively. That's a lie. Reyes pointed to the evidence locker inventory Charles and John had submitted, a list of items confiscated from Sebastian. It included his phone, tablet, and wallet. Wait, Theodora said. suddenly focusing on a blank spot in the inventory. Sebastian, where's your timepiece? Sebastian always wore an expensive, custom-built smartwatch, a piece of wearable tech that Andrew's company had created for high-risk clients. Sebastian looked down at his bare wrist. They took it. It was on my arm when they cuffed me. I asked for it back, but Charles just slipped it into his pocket and didn't log it. Theodora's heartbeat accelerated. The watch wasn't on the official inventory. Charles had stolen a piece of crucial evidence. Describe the watch for me, Seba. Not the timekeeping features, the security ones. It's the OmniWatch 8X, Sebastian explained, slowly regaining his confidence as he talked about the technology. Dad customized it after I had some trouble with bullies last year. It connects to the biometric data in the cloud, but it has a specific, rarely used feature. He leaned in. It's a passive, encrypted audio recording feature. If the watch detects a rapid heart rate spike of 20% or more, signaling extreme stress or fear, it instantly activates a high-gain, internal mic and starts recording a 30-minute loop. It's military-grade, Mom. Encrypted, with an instant self-destruct if the casing is compromised. Theodora stared at him, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. The biometric data from the assault would have been off the charts. The recording would not only capture John's racial slur, but the entire soundscape of the assault, directly contradicting the officer's written reports. Sebastian, you just handed us the entire prosecution, Theodora breathed. The watch was now the single most critical piece of evidence, and it was sitting in the Mason Creek police evidence locker, protected by Chief Davies. Charles didn't log it because he wanted to keep a $5,000 piece of tech, Reyes surmised. It's logged under personal property, unassigned, or it's simply hidden. Theodora quickly cross-referenced the custody chain. If it's not logged, it's still in the chief's administrative sphere. Davies controls the physical access to that evidence room. A direct, official retrieval was impossible. The FBI was blocked, and Davies would never release unlogged evidence voluntarily, especially after Andrew's financial threat. Any subpoena now would alert Davies immediately, giving him time to lose or destroy the item. Theodora contacted Andrew, who was on a conference call coordinating the next phase of the economic attack. Andrew, we found the key. Charles stole Sebastian's OmniWatch. It contains a passive audio recording of the entire assault, including the racial slur, she explained rapidly. Where is it? Andrew's voice was instantly razor-sharp. Mason Creek evidence locker. Unlogged property, likely hidden near Davies' office. We can't subpoena, we can't ask. We need eyes inside, or we need to access the data without touching the physical watch. Andrew paused, the sound of his corporate team waiting patiently on the line. The watch is one of ours, Theodora. It's got remote diagnostics and an embedded homing beacon. We can't touch the physical evidence, but we can try to extract the data. Can you ping the location without alerting their security? I can do more than that. I built the OS. I can remotely initiate a data dump, but it will require a localized, high-power uplink near the station to transmit 30 minutes of encrypted audio without triggering the watch's self-destruct protocol. And it will be a race against time. If Davies realizes the watch is missing or compromised, he'll destroy it. Andrew pivoted instantly. Elena, forget the full municipal audit for a moment. I need you to file an emergency injunction on the premise of protecting corporate property that contains proprietary data. Argue trade secret protection. It won't get us the watch, but it will buy us a few hours of procedural noise. Marcus, I need a detailed blueprint of the Mason Creek PD. Security access points, server room, and ventilation shafts. He cut the call with Theodora. The situation had shifted from economic warfare to a high-stakes, covert intelligence extraction. Theodora and Reyes would handle the logistics of the data retrieval, while Andrew provided the technical and legal cover to distract the Mason Creek PD long enough for the operation to succeed. The watch, the silent witness, was now the primary objective. Andrew didn't believe in subtlety, but he believed in procedural camouflage. His legal maneuver was a masterpiece of corporate misdirection. While the mayor and Chief Davies were preoccupied with the burgeoning economic disaster, Andrew had just leaked news that the Omnicorp withdrawal included relocating a major supplier, quadrupling the job losses. Elena Rodriguez executed the tactical legal strike. The subpoena was surgical. A demand for the immediate inventory, imaging, and external assessment of all electronic items confiscated between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. on the day of the incident, claiming the need to protect corporate trade secrets contained in a prototype wearable device. The language was dense, focusing entirely on intellectual property, never mentioning Sebastian or police conduct. Because the mayor was desperate to appear compliant after the financial obliteration, he ordered Chief Davies to comply immediately, viewing the action as a minor technical annoyance rather than a deadly threat. Andrew's designated third-party tech team, an Omnicorp subsidiary specializing in IP recovery, was granted exactly 30 minutes in the evidence room. They didn't retrieve the physical watch, but during the imaging process of the device Charles had tucked away, they executed Andrew's customized remote data dump protocol. The file transfer was completed in Theodora's offsite lab. Reyes, monitoring the transfer status, looked up at Theodora. Got it. Clean download. Full 30 minutes. High-gain audio. The file name is cryptically tagged 8X-A-20230-914. Bio alert. Andrew stood beside Theodora, his face a granite mask. The three of them, Theodora, Andrew, and Sebastian, gathered around the terminal. The air was thick with anticipation and dread. This is it, Seba, Andrew said, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. This is the truth. Everything they tried to silence. Theodora pressed play. The recording began with the mundane sounds of the parking lot. Ambient traffic, distant chatter. Then, the crunch of tires, the immediate sound of Charles's voice, sharp and commanding. Hands on the hood, boy. Don't move. The watch's proximity to Sebastian's ear captured the slight hitch in his breath, the subtle sound of fear. Sir, I'm waiting for my father. I haven't done anything. Oh, a smart mouth. You think that jacket protects you? We know what kind of punk you are. Just another thief who belongs in jail. Then came the sounds of the physical assault. The heavy thump as Charles slammed Sebastian against the sedan door, followed by a grunt of pain. The audio clarity was chilling. And you should know your place, parasite. We see your kind every day. The sound of Sebastian's stifled protest followed, choked by the pressure on his shoulder. The most damning section arrived seconds later, the crucial evidence that cemented the intent to cover up. Hold him. Did you turn yours off? Yeah, right when he started squirming. That'll cover the use of force. Davies will back us. We're clean. The recording continued, capturing the metallic click of the handcuffs, the dragging across the pavement, and finally, the relative silence of the cruiser's interior. Theodora slammed the stop button. The silence that followed was immense, heavy with the weight of unvarnished truth. Sebastian sat perfectly still, his eyes focused on the speaker. He hadn't flinched, but the tension had bled out of his shoulders. The fear was replaced by a quiet, profound validation. He said he turned it off right when he started squirming. Sebastian whispered, his voice steady now. They were planning it. The trauma hadn't been fabricated. The assault hadn't been an accident. It was a calculated act of dominance and institutional certainty. Andrew stood behind his son, his hand gripping Sebastian's shoulder tight. He didn't speak. There was no need for rage. The cold, objective audio was exponentially more powerful than any shouted accusation. Theodora leaned back, her own professional anger sharpened into a deadly focus. The recusal order, the political stalling, the fabricated reports, all irrelevant now. This audio wasn't just evidence. It was a detonation device. It provided the intent, the slur, the physical assault, and the conspiracy to obstruct justice, all in one neat package. They are done, Theodora stated, her voice pure ice. This is the smoking gun, Andrew. Conspiracy to violate civil rights, filing false police reports, and official oppression. This is federal jurisdiction, bypasses the local DA, and goes straight to the U.S. attorney. Reyes had already begun applying forensic markers, timestamps, and chain of custody protocols to the recovered file. It's pristine. No possibility of digital manipulation. It's ready for presentation. But we don't present it yet, Andrew interjected, turning to Theodora. His strategic vision remained focused on systemic destruction, not just individual prosecution. Why wait? Theodora asked, though she already understood the answer. Because if we release this now, the mayor will simply fire Charles and John, claim the problem is solved, and ask me to reinstate the $500 million investment. The city survives, and the systemic rot under Chief Davies remains untouched. Andrew paced the small perimeter of the lab. The mayor and the city council are currently panicking over economic annihilation. They are under maximum pressure to comply with any order that stops the bleeding. We wait until they decide that Chief Davies is the disposable piece. So we let the mayor fire Davies, hoping that chaos exposes more records? Theodora clarified. Precisely. We use the financial hammer to force the political system to cannibalize itself, Andrew confirmed. The second Davies is out, the evidence room is vulnerable. The internal documents about previous complaints, the financial corruption we know he's shielded, all that information becomes accessible without his bureaucratic barrier. Theodora nodded, reviewing the timeline. We wait for the mayor's press conference tomorrow morning. He will have to address the financial crisis. He will be forced to announce political casualties. When he fires Davies, we drop the audio, Andrew finalized. The public will demand that every politician who ever supported Davies be purged. They wanted to attack Sebastian? Now we expose the system protecting them and burn it to the ground. The evidence, now secured, lay waiting. A silent, pristine recording of two men who thought their badge offered impunity. They were about to learn that laying hands on the Andrew heir meant laying hands on a global corporation, an FBI assistant director, and a technological weapon they never saw coming. The morning after Andrew's initial financial strike, Mason Creek City Hall was a disaster zone. The mayor was locked in frantic meetings with the city council, trying to determine which political head to sacrifice. But Chief Davies, cornered and desperate, refused to go down quietly. Davies understood that his only defense lay in character assassination and muddying the waters. If he could convince the public that Sebastian Andrew was a problem child deserving of suspicion, the police action could be framed as a necessary intervention rather than racial profiling. The first smear hit the local news wire, distributed by a reporter known to be close to the police union. Headline: Source alleges FBI director's son has history of trouble, potential drug use. The articles, based on thinly veiled leaks from the police department's contacts in the school system, suggested Sebastian had been involved in disciplinary actions and alluded to behavioral issues that made his presence near a luxury car suspicious. The implication was clear. The police had probable cause to detain a known delinquent. Theodora watched the broadcast in her high-security office, her expression cold. This was textbook retaliation, designed to instill doubt and slow the momentum of the federal intervention. They went after his character Andrew, she stated, clicking off the monitor. They didn't just lie, they leveraged his school records. That is witness intimidation, and they know it. Theodora immediately initiated formal FBI documentation of the smear campaign, detailing the source of the leaks and the clear intent to obstruct justice. She knew the papers wouldn't stop publishing, but she was building a secondary case against Davies for witness tampering. Andrew, however, responded with overwhelming, suffocating force, matching Davies' petty slander with economic annihilation. He went live on a national financial news network, turning the segment into a declaration of war against municipal corruption. Chief Davies claims my son is the problem. I claim Chief Davies is running a racket, Andrew announced, his delivery cool and authoritative. He displayed the preliminary findings of Omnicorp's hostile audit. The slides were concise, devastatingly factual, and accompanied by the precision graphic design only a global corporation could muster. They detailed clear instances of police fund misuse. 3 unbudgeted luxury SUVs purchased for administrative use. $80,000 in travel expenses for police leadership to attend a conference that never happened, and highly unusual private contracts awarded without competitive bidding to companies owned by close associates of Chief Davies. "This is not an allegation of poor spending," Andrew said, leveling his gaze directly into the camera. "This is evidence of systemic self-enrichment and malfeasance enabled by a complicit chief of police. While Mason Creek residents struggle with rising taxes, their police chief is treating the municipal budget as his private slush fund." To underline the gravity of the situation, Andrew then announced the further tightening of the financial noose. Effective immediately, Omnicorp is not only withdrawing the $500 million tech park investment, we are doubling the punitive withdrawal amount to $1 billion in associated contracts and supply chains over the next fiscal quarter, Andrew stated. Furthermore, all local hiring initiatives for Omnicorp contractors are suspended. We will not reward a jurisdiction where corruption is actively protected. The economic fallout was instant. Regional stocks dipped. Local banks began freezing lines of credit based on Mason Creek's toxic municipal outlook. The city was officially in financial crisis, and the blame was now irrevocably tied to Chief Davies. The escalating tension brought the fight to the Andrew doorstep. Later that afternoon, Andrew's head of security called in a chilling report. The sleek, black custom sedan, the one Sebastian had been pinned against, had been subtly vandalized while parked in the secure, exterior compound lot. It wasn't a smash and grab. The side panel was keyed deep, not just scratched, and a crude, childish drawing of a hangman's noose had been spray-painted onto the driver's side door. Clear, desperate threat. Theodora stepped outside, surveying the damage under the watchful glare of the security cameras. The officers hadn't just assaulted her son. They were now escalating to intimidation tactics, crossing the line into clear criminal behavior. The level of desperation is accelerating, Theodora noted, speaking into her encrypted comms to Andrew. This was either Charles or John, or someone acting on their direct orders. They think we'll back down if they introduce physical threat. They think they're fighting a lawsuit. Andrew's voice crackled back, calm but sharp. They don't understand they're fighting a sovereign entity. Theodora immediately elevated their security protocol to level 4. Perimeter lockdown, armed security rotation, and immediate installation of motion-activated thermal cameras on all exterior approaches. Andrew, standing in his office, picked up the dedicated line to Mayor Thompson. The mayor answered instantly, his voice riddled with anxiety. "Andrew, please, your announcement today. It's destroying the city. We are trying to work this out. We are preparing to fire Davies." "You are trying, Mayor? Try harder." Andrew's voice was cold, devoid of sympathy. "Your chief of police just committed witness intimidation and vandalism against my private property. My wife is an assistant director of the FBI. Do you understand the catastrophic nature of the federal charges that are currently being prepared? I need time. I need 72 hours to push this through the city council," Thompson pleaded. Andrew's ultimatum was final, non-negotiable, and delivered with surgical precision. "You have 48 hours, Mayor. By the end of business tomorrow, I want a signed public statement detailing Chief Davies' immediate, permanent removal, the firing of Officers Charles and John, and a formal agreement to fully cooperate with all federal inquiries into the Mason Creek PD budget and practices. If I see one more smear in the news, one more act of violence against my family, or 1 minute of delay, I will initiate a foreclosure on every city property where my company holds debt. Mason Creek will become a corporate wasteland, and you, Mayor, will be remembered as the man who sold the city for a petty bigot." Andrew hung up. The fight was no longer a negotiation. It was an enforced surrender. The mayor now had the full weight of economic collapse sitting on his desk, forcing him to choose between saving his city and saving his chief. The stage was set for the public fall. The emergency city council meeting was held in a locked chamber at Mason Creek City Hall, the atmosphere thick with panic, sweat, and betrayal. The massive mahogany table, usually a symbol of local governance, now resembled a life raft rapidly taking on water. Mayor Thompson, his suit wrinkled and his face ashen, tried desperately to cling to the last vestiges of dignity, laying out Andrew's ultimatum on the table. He is demanding the immediate termination of Chief Davies, the firing of Officers Charles and John, and a full transfer of all evidence to the federal authorities for investigation. Thompson whispered, his voice hoarse from stress. If we refuse, he has promised to liquidate all Omnicorp holdings in the region, costing us billions in future revenue and ensuring our tax base evaporates. Councilwoman Ramirez, whose husband owned the largest commercial real estate firm in Mason Creek, slammed her fist on the table. He already cost us $500 million yesterday. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. Businesses are pulling out of the industrial park. We vote to comply immediately. Davies is a liability we can no longer afford. Another council member, a staunch political ally of Chief Davies just 48 hours prior, nervously shuffled the audit notes Andrew had publicly released, the ones detailing the chief's questionable spending. The public already hates Davies for the economic collapse. We fire him now, we call him a bad apple, and we save the city. We have no choice. The alternative is personal financial ruin for every person in this room. The mayor tried one last time to defend the institutional integrity. But we can't just surrender to an outside corporate entity. What precedent does this set? The precedent, Mayor, is survival, Ramirez countered, her voice sharp with finality. The vote was taken quickly, 7-0 in favor of accepting Andrew's terms. The silence afterward was the sound of political machinery grinding to a halt, the institutional protection of decades shattered by a targeted economic siege. Theodora, watching the secure feed of the meeting from her remote lab, ensured that her team drafted the necessary legal language for the subsequent agreements. The document specifying the transfer of evidence was meticulously worded. It demanded the immediate and complete handover of all physical and electronic evidence related to the stop, including all internal logs, the initial evidence inventory, and specifically, any and all unassigned electronic property belonging to Sebastian Andrew to the designated federal prosecutor, bypassing the compromised U.S. Attorney's Office Hayes had tried to assign. Chief Davies was informed of his immediate termination via a terse phone call from the mayor's chief of staff. He reacted with predictable, venomous fury, slamming his office door and reportedly shouting obscenities. The irony was devastating. The chief who had assured Charles and John they were clean was now himself rendered officially toxic. The mayor's press conference was a masterpiece of humiliating damage control. He stood alone at the podium, his posture defeated, facing a throng of local and national reporters eager for the political bloodletting. Effective immediately, Chief Davies has resigned, Mayor Thompson announced, refusing to make eye contact with the cameras. This decision follows a series of internal policy disagreements and a need for new leadership to address current civic instability. He then delivered the lines Andrew had demanded. Furthermore, the Mason Creek Police Department has concluded that the conduct of officers Charles and John during a recent stop involving a minor did not meet departmental standards. Both officers have been immediately terminated for cause. The mayor struggled through a prepared statement, attempting to attribute the entire incident to a few bad apples who failed to adhere to the core principles of community policing, a blatant attempt to protect the structural integrity of the department. He concluded by announcing that the city would fully cooperate with all federal inquiries and was eager to restore its partnership with Omnicorp. The institutional protection was officially gone. Davies, Charles, and John were out in the cold. Andrew's response was swift and calculated, designed to ensure the local authority knew this was only a temporary ceasefire, not peace. His official Omnicorp statement was released within 15 minutes of the mayor finishing his press conference. It was terse and unforgiving. Omnicorp statement regarding Mason Creek, CA. Omnicorp acknowledges the Mason Creek City Council's decision to accept our non-negotiable terms and remove the individuals responsible for the assault and subsequent cover-up concerning Sebastian Andrew. As a gesture of goodwill, the announced escalation of financial withdrawals has been temporarily placed on hold. However, the full, forensic audit of the municipal budget will continue unabated until all federal charges are formally filed and the systemic issues enabling this corruption are resolved. Compliance is not a negotiation. It is a mandate. The city was saved from immediate bankruptcy, but it remained under martial law, economically speaking. The local police force, demoralized and aware that their political shield had dissolved, instantly felt the terror of exposure. Without Davies' protection, the previously dismissed civilian complaints against officers Charles and John were suddenly very real threats. The real victory, however, was quiet. Across town, a federal prosecutor, acting under a highly classified directive, signed the receipt for the evidence transfer from the Mason Creek City Hall evidence room. Contained within the sealed box was the OmniWatch 8X and the digital file containing the pristine, damning audio. Theodora watched the evening news, the mayor's humiliating face filling the screen. Her focus remained on the next phase. Davies is gone, the officers are fired, and the evidence is secured, she told Andrew, who was on a brief call with his security team. We have everything we need for the indictment. But we still need to neutralize the political allies who enabled Davies, the ones Hayes was afraid of. Andrew looked at her, his expression grim. I still have $500 million leveraged against this city, Theodora. They have one more layer of political armor to shed. Let's see how the Attorney General handles the subpoena when we threaten to pull the emergency housing loan they need to keep the lights on. The local battle was won, but the war for systemic accountability, the battle against the higher-up politicians who ensured immunity, was just beginning. The hammer had crushed the local shield. Now the scalpel was ready to carve out the rot. The morning following the capitulation, the air over Mason Creek was charged with suppressed chaos. The police department was a ghost town of fear and resentment, the institutional loyalty dissolving like dust. The officers who remained knew they were exposed, the protective shield of Chief Davies having vaporized overnight. At 0600 hours, Theodora Andrew, no longer sidelined by Director Hayes, arrived in force. She wasn't wearing the casual attire of a grieving mother. She was clad in full tactical gear, the official FBI insignia visible on her vest, radiating the focused authority of a federal agent prepared for war. She drove a convoy of unmarked FBI vehicles, not driven by her own team, but by the official Civil Rights Task Force she had activated the moment the mayor signed the surrender document. The sight of the heavily armed federal agents descending on the Mason Creek Police Department shocked the handful of remaining officers into immediate compliance. This wasn't a routine administrative visit. It was an occupation. Theodora led the entry team, her motions precise and economical. She bypassed the front desk and walked straight toward the administrative offices. She personally served the arrest warrants for officers Charles and John, who were found in the locker room, attempting to clean out their personal effects. Officers Charles and John, Theodora announced, her voice echoing in the empty hallway. You are under arrest on federal charges of deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and filing false police reports. You have the right to remain silent. The officers, stripped of their power and their badge, could only stare, their faces contorted in disbelief and rapidly accelerating fear. They were quickly cuffed, read their rights by another agent, and led out through the back door. The local system had protected them, but the federal system had just claimed them. The primary objective was the systematic dismantling of Davies' network of corruption. Theodora headed directly to the former chief's office, anticipating his final, desperate attempt at erasure. The door was locked, but the sounds of frantic activity could be heard within. Theodora gave the breach command. The team forced the door open, finding Chief Davies alone in his expansive office, bathed in the sickly green light of his monitors. He was frantically dragging and deleting encrypted files on his terminal and jamming papers into a shredder. Chief Davies, Theodora said, stepping into the room, her sidearm holstered but her presence dominating the space. The federal government is seizing all Mason Creek PD assets related to systemic corruption and civil rights violations. You are relieved of all duties, and you are under federal investigation. Davies stopped shredding, his hands frozen above the machine. He looked up, his eyes wide, the arrogance finally replaced by sheer terror. This is political. You can't do this, Andrew. Your husband is using his corporate power to conduct an illegal vendetta. Davies stammered, pointing a shaking finger at her. Theodora allowed a moment of cold, profound satisfaction to cross her face. Vendetta? No. Justice. she corrected him. We didn't need a vendetta. We needed evidence. Thanks to my husband's audit, we know you've been running this department as a private investment firm. The SUVs, the travel expenses, the no-bid contracts, we have it all. She walked toward the large, ornamental bookshelf, reaching for a specific leather-bound volume that seemed slightly misplaced. She pulled it out, revealing a keypad behind the shelf. And thanks to my own intelligence, I know the access code to your personal evidence safe, Davies. She continued, keying in the numbers. She had obtained the access codes through a quick interrogation of Davies' terrified secretary after the mayor's press conference. The safe clicked open, revealing stacks of cash, sensitive personnel files, and a secondary encrypted hard drive, Davies' private stash of leverage and illegal financial records. You protected Charles and John because they were your foot soldiers, willing to violate the law to protect your power base, Theodora stated, signaling the forensics team. Your cover-up of my son's assault was just the most visible thread in a tapestry of years of corruption. The FBI agents quickly moved in, bagging and tagging every piece of physical and digital evidence. They seized the main server room, immediately initiating the recovery of the corrupted bodycam footage. Davies, defeated and sweating profusely, was led out of his office in federal cuffs. Theodora stayed until the last hard drive was secured and the last piece of paper documented. The FBI was effectively running the department now, ensuring every piece of protected evidence, including records on every officer who had violated policy under Davies' tenure, was exposed. Later that evening, the Andrew family sat in the back of their custom SUV, parked discreetly a block away from the now-silent police station. The national news cycle was dominated by the images. Chief Davies led away in handcuffs, and the FBI insignia plastered across the Mason Creek PD building. Sebastian sat between his parents, quiet but alert. He watched the screen as the news anchors discussed the systemic shakeup, the pending federal indictments, and the unprecedented corporate-federal alliance that had forced the change. It's over, Seba, Theodora said softly, reaching back to hold his hand. They're all facing federal charges, and the city is under audit. They won't get away with it. Sebastian nodded, squeezing her hand. The cold knot of dread had finally dissipated, replaced by a quiet sense of justice realized. The trauma was real, but so was the vindication. Andrew turned in the driver's seat, his face reflecting the cool, determined satisfaction of a man who had successfully weaponized his fortune for a principle higher than profit. We didn't just get justice for you, son, Andrew said, his voice deep and resonant. We dismantled a corrupt system that was designed to protect itself. We used our power, your mother's authority and my wealth, to ensure that laying hands on a child of color for no reason has a cost so high that no city in this country will ever dare to protect those officers again. Theodora looked out the window at the dark police station, now a monument to a system defeated. They hadn't waited for the slow churn of bureaucracy. They hadn't relied on the kindness of politicians. They had deployed authority, ruthlessness, and an uncompromising commitment to power. The Andrew legacy would now be defined not by tech or law, but by the systemic change they had violently forced onto the American landscape. The engine purred to life. The black SUV turned smoothly and drove away from Mason Creek, leaving behind a city in financial and political reconstruction. A chilling reminder of what happens when you cross the air to a global tech empire. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't.